Welcome to another episode of Automotive Insiders. I'm your host, Jason Stein. Great to have you back listening again here on this platform. The automotive supply chain has always been built on complexity, but today, complexity has been replaced by uncertainty. Tariffs are changing by the month. EV programs are being delayed, resized, or canceled altogether. Contract disputes are growing more complicated, and workforce challenges are no longer just an HR issue, they've become a supply chain issue. For suppliers, the question is no longer whether the industry will change. The question is how quickly companies can adapt while protecting margins, preserving customer relationships, and managing risks. Today, my guest is at the intersection of many of those conversations. David DeVine is a shareholder at Butzel and a member of the firm's automotive industry team. For nearly 2 decades, he's advised companies through some of the most difficult business disputes, with a particular focus on automotive supply chains, pricing disputes, warranty issues, tooling claims, bankruptcy matters, and contract negotiations. He works with suppliers of every size and every tier, helping them navigate in an environment where legal strategy and business strategy are increasingly inseparable. As the automotive industry continues to wrestle with tariff uncertainty, shifting production plans, changing trade policies, and workforce pressures, suppliers are facing a level of complexity few could have imagined just a few years ago. Today, we'll discuss what feels fundamentally different about today's challenges, how suppliers should think about contract risk, why workforce strategy is now central to supply chain planning, and what executives should be doing right now to prepare for the second half of 2026. We'll also preview the upcoming Southern Supplier Summit in Greenville, South Carolina, where many of these issues will take center stage. David DeVine joins me next on Automotive Insiders. David, it's a pleasure to have you back on the program. Welcome in.
Thanks, Jason. Thanks for having me on, and it's a pleasure to be here.
Well, looking forward to seeing you in the South coming up. We're proud that you are a presenting sponsor of MEMA's annual Southern Conference, the Southern Supplier Summit, and it will be great to be with you at that time, as we were in the past. So looking forward to it.
Likewise. Thanks, Jason.
So many things to discuss. Let's get into maybe, first of all, the supply chain facing what has been characterized as a multi-dimensional set of challenges. And, you know, over the past few months, year really, so many rapid policy swings, tariffs struck down quickly, then quickly reintroduced through other mechanisms. And there's a persistent level of uncertainty for so many manufacturers right now. And there's so many issues converging: trade policy, material pricing, production volume, volatility. From your view, what feels fundamentally different about today's supply chain challenges compared to even just a couple of years ago?
I think you hit the nail on the head with that question, Jason. I think there are a lot of forces that are converging right now, from trade policy to material pricing pressures to production volume volatility and workforce planning. And suppliers need to be mindful of all of those considerations at once while they're making their business plans. One other issue, at least in Michigan, certainly over the past couple or few years, has been the litigation that has followed from the Michigan Supreme Court case of Airboss, which was 2023. That deals with what is required for a quantity statement in a requirements contract. Many people are familiar with this, but it's the standard model for production in the auto industry. The buyer's going to buy as many products as it needs in good faith, and the seller's going to sell to the buyer as many as the buyer needs in good faith. One issue that has arisen from that in particular recently is whether ranges satisfy the stated volume requirement. And the Michigan Supreme Court was going to be dealing with a case involving FCA with a 65 to 100% requirements range this year. And ultimately, the parties settled shortly before that argument. So there wasn't an opportunity for the Michigan Supreme Court to weigh in. So we're now left with what the Michigan Court of Appeals has done on that issue, which found the 65 to 100% volume requirement valid. But this has implications for other jurisdictions too. Not only is there some uncertainty in Michigan, but these are uniform commercial code principles. So it's followed in other jurisdictions as well. And you can end up with some real uncertainty and possibilities for dispute. in the supply chain, and also opportunities for leverage for some of the suppliers. So that's certainly a legal difference that has changed over the past couple or few years.
So many issues to navigate through. Of course, one of the heavier ones, and one that doesn't seem to be going away, involves tariffs. They indeed are not going away. They're just getting more complicated. And there are a number of different movements that have occurred here. How should executives think about sourcing strategies when tariff certainty now seems to be measured, David, in months, not years?
I think that's exactly right as well, Jason. Certainly in early 2026, we've seen a temporary rollback of certain emergency tariffs, but there are new Section 232 and 301 actions that are already reshaping costs for metals, components, downstream products, and auto suppliers are now dealing with changing tariffs on steel, aluminum, certain derivatives, increased scrutiny on country of origin and USMCA compliance, and the planning horizons are shorter. So it does definitely make these long-term decisions harder. And it's particularly an issue in the high growth manufacturing regions, the South included, where the companies are scaling fast and they're relying on global inputs. So there are pressures, certainly, for suppliers, particularly where the contract requires them to bear all the risk of tariffs, but there also are opportunities to make sure that your contract provides for the right risk allocation in the event of changing tariffs, in addition to your business sourcing decisions.
Let's talk about one of the other big hot buttons. That's obviously EV program delays, really reshaping supplier risk, especially in the Southeast. And I know we'll be talking about it extensively in front of our summit audience coming up. You know, one of the most impactful developments this year has been the EV program delays and outright cancellations. So suppliers are confronting all kinds of issues, right? How should suppliers be positioning themselves to protect their businesses if an OEM slows down or hits pause?
The biggest issue in those circumstances, of course, are the significant capital investments that suppliers are making to get ready to produce in the program. So when you've got disappointment in volumes, you've got unrecoverable costs in certain instances, or at least not to the full extent that you were anticipating. You've got tooling and engineering costs. There ends up being pressure to renegotiate pricing mid-program for those programs that are continuing but have reduced volumes. But of course, if the contract is already formed, you don't have the same opportunity necessarily to recover those. So one of the most important responses for suppliers is to assess your contract language, do it with your counsel. Forecasts, termination rights, recovery clauses, these are now core business risks. For new contracts, a supplier absolutely needs to be mindful of the risk they're taking on if they aren't negotiating a way to recover their investment in the event of a volume drop or a cancellation. And for existing contracts, this sounds simple, but it's not always. You need to assess what your contract actually is. There are a lot of documents that typically make up the automotive contract. It's not always as clear cut as it seems. What program stage are you in as well? So, for instance, if production has begun, you may be under the production T's and C's if the buyers govern, or if you're still pre-production, perhaps there's a different agreement altogether with different terms that's still governing. There's also a distinction too between delayed programs or reduced volumes and outright cancellations, and that can trigger different clauses and rights in terms of your recovery as a supplier.
Workforce pressures are a huge supply chain issue. How are workforce realities changing the calculus on reshoring or even nearshoring some decisions, David?
It is certainly a pressure. Supply chain decisions can no longer be made without factoring in labor availability, mobility, compliance. So in the southern US in particular, companies are facing a mix of rapid plant expansion and competition for skilled labor. There are labor law changes abroad, including in Mexico, for instance, that have affected nearshoring economics. So decisions about where to manufacture increasingly hinge on who you can hire, who you can train, and who you can retain, not just cost per unit. We also expect to see additional workforce organization issues, particularly in those regions where EV volume drops have been most impactful and possibly reduced hours of workers. So it's another trend that we're on the lookout for.
Yeah. All of these issues that we've just discussed are all going to come together at the Southern Supplier Summit in Greenville, June 22nd and 23rd. So timely that we're going to be talking about these things. What can executives expect to walk away from following the Butzel panel that's in Greenville?
We are very proud of the panel that we have assembled. We've got practical, boots on the ground guidance. Our panelists are bringing outstanding experience to the table. Our panel includes Blake Paget, who is an excellent part of Butzel's labor and employment group. And we also have from the supplier side representation from Mark Heber of Carlex Glass America. We've got Nicoletta Milanesio Barino of Mala Industries, and we've got Monica Batsford of Forvia. These are all seasoned veterans in the industry. Their companies have truly global footprints. We're going to be focusing on how suppliers should reassess their contracts in light of program delays. We'll be focusing on managing tariff risks while maintaining competitiveness. And we'll be focusing on aligning workforce strategy with supply chain shifts. So you're going to be hearing from some true veterans in the industry that offer some great perspective. Undoubtedly, these are major challenges. There's not an easy or right answer for all companies necessarily, but they're going to offer great perspective on it. It's going to be a great discussion.
Finally, if you could give Southern suppliers any advice heading into the second half of 26, given all that we've talked about, David, what would that be?
Take inventory of your supply contracts, especially issues relating to forecasts, termination, recovery language. Reevaluate your sourcing assumptions in light of changing tariff regimes. Assess whether your workforce strategy is aligned with your supply chain reality. Certainly use opportunities like our Southern Supplier Summit to pressure test your decisions with peers facing the same challenges, see how they're responding to it. And on a big picture level, understand that uncertainty is here to stay for the foreseeable future. So suppliers need to be innovative and competitive, not just in their product offerings, but also in re-examining the old contract paradigm. For so long, the industry has been fixed price, life of the program, seller bearing almost all the risk, and that's just not as tenable anymore. So we've seen some instances in which suppliers have gotten at least some relief or accommodation from their customers after entering into the contract. But generally, you're not entitled to it in those circumstances. So shaping your rights on the front end is always the best. It's a challenging time for sure, but there are opportunities here for the industry as well. And we look forward to a great event and a great discussion in Greenville.
Butzel will be with us at MEMA's annual Southern Conference, the Southern Supplier Summit, co-hosted by MEMA, the Georgia Automotive Manufacturers Association, the South Carolina Manufacturers and Commerce, taking place June 22nd, 23rd at QICAR, Clemson University International Center for Automotive Research in Greenville, South Carolina. David, I'll see you there. It's a pleasure having you on the program.
Always a pleasure, Jason. Thank you very much and look forward to seeing you down there.
Thanks again to my guest, David DeVine of Butzel. And remember, the MEMA Annual Southern Conference, the Southern Supplier Summit, co-hosted by MEMA Original Equipment Suppliers, the Georgia Automotive Manufacturers Association, and the South Carolina Manufacturers and Commerce, will take place June 22nd and 23rd at Clemson University International Center for Automotive Research in Greenville, South Carolina. Thanks for listening to this week's program. We'll see you next time.